Hello?
Hey Tina, it's Greg.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going okay. How are you?
I'm okay. What's going on?
Not too much. I was wondering if you wanted to be in my documentary.
Sure. What's your documentary?
My documentary is I'm asking people what's the biggest mistake they've ever made.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you want to do it?
I was going to do it over the phone.
Oh, okay.
How does now sound?
What up?
Hey, how are you saying?
How's it going?
It's good, okay. Do you want to be in my documentary?
Sure.
It's just the one question. I've kind of rephrased it, and this may help you narrow it,
yeah.
but the biggest mistake you've ever made?
In grade 10, and I was in art class, and I got kicked out for, like, goofing off or whatever, and we were, like, out in the hall, and our friend came in from gym class, and he had one of those, like, giant, like, Pilates balls, like those giant blow-up bouncy balls.
Mm-hmm.
And then my friend had the bright idea to, like, run at me with it, basically just launch me off of it. So I, like, stood there and totally, right at the last second, obviously knew this was a bad idea. Totally just threw me off this huge ball, and I flew back, snapped my wrist in half. So that was a pretty big mistake.
I even wrote up a bunch of question requirements. It can't be too invasive. It has to at first seem kind of banal, but then open itself up to a greater understanding of blah 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 blah. You know, like.
But you could phrase this question like that in a way more silly way.
Like how?
Well, you could be like, if you had a time machine and you could go back, but only change something in your life.
If you were to go back in time and change one thing about your life, no one else's life, what would it be?
Can I just say a general thing?
You can say whatever you want.
That I was quicker to talk about problems that I had with people than just forgetting about them and not saying anything.
Basically, the biggest mistake of my life is not being focused for the past 10 years.
Well, sure, there's stuff we would have changed.
Yeah.
Could have. Spent more time with you guys, the kids and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Done more things together, that kind of stuff. But
probably going to school, starting my degree and paying all that money.
Getting to know my multiple sclerosis-ridden aunt better before she died. Or learning how to skateboard. Or possibly play an instrument.
Those are very different things.
I think ultimately I try to phrase the question so it can be interpreted differently, but I think it all points to regret, you know?
Yeah.
In hopes that that'll open up something.
I think as far as regretting stuff, personal stuff, you sort of have to move past stuff and not think about things as something that you regret. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel okay about regretting stuff about money when it's stuff about relationship. It can't be so simple as being well, if I'd done this differently, it would be okay now, So I don't really feel like I can think about things that way. If I only had changed this one thing, or done this one thing, or not done this one thing, it's always a million little things.
The thing I find kind of interesting with this question is it kind of points to regret.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you regretted not being more focused so you couldn't achieve certain things.
Yeah.
At the same time, ask you, are you kind of happy with what you are, where you are now?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. When you say the biggest mistake of your life, I don't really feel like I have anything too tumultuous or something that made me fall down to a great extent. I just feel like I've never actually risen to my full, spread my wings as far as I could.
I feel like that's kind of maybe representative of what I find problematic about trying to answer the question, because the thing about my aunt is I only really learned stuff about her after she died.
Yeah.
Because as long as I knew her as a kid, it was she was so far gone that only 2 members of our family could communicate with her. In years since, I've heard so many amazing stories about her, what she was like when she was younger, and she was kind of it's a member of my extended family who I took after most, even though I never knew her. like at the time.
If you go back in time, are you like the outcome of like things?
Well, that's an interesting thing too. What do you think that something would happen? So you went back and you dealt with that, told yourself to deal with that problem, and you hope that yourself listened, and you went back in time to present day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think what would be different?
Well, I think that someone who was very close to me wouldn't be as hurt as they are now. And it's probably like, I'd say it's one of my like life's biggest regret was hurting that person.
How much do you think the regret and mistake shapes who you are? So like, how much are you a sum of your mistakes and your experiences?
I don't like to think of myself as a sum of mistakes, but in some respects I very well am.
A regret that has changed my life, but that I wouldn't necessarily want to go back and change, is how, like, when I was defining myself in terms of being, like, super politically radical and being, like, super gung-ho about it, how I alienated most of my friends and drove a lot of people away from me in a lot of ways. Like, that's something, the regret from that, like the lesson learned from that, I guess, has totally been life-changing.
See, I guess that draws an interesting sort of like line in the thing is like, when is it a regret and when is it a lesson? Because regret implies you'd like to change it.
Like, I mean, in a way, maybe that's what applies to what I was talking about with being a fucked up political jerk, you know? Like, I kind of regret whatever my decision was to be a dick like that, but I don't regret the consequences, and therefore I don't regret the decision. I mean, I do regret the decision and that I did that, but the consequences being that, like, it sort of changed everything. No, regret's one of those things that's maybe a lot more complicated than we tend to usually think.
If I was asked the question, if I could go back in time and change one thing about my life, no one else's, what would it be? On any given day, I would answer, I would spend more time with my parents, or I would have not gone to school, or I would have convinced myself to be more focused, or to talk sooner about my problems so I don't hurt someone I care about, or have learned to skateboard. But we can't go back and change those decisions, so there's always a million little things.